Welcome back everyone to the next episode of the Multipliers Club. Now this is actually part 2 of a podcast that we filmed, so if you haven't seen part 1, make sure to go and check it out before you listen to this. It was a long episode all about property, different property strategies, and we went in a lot of detail, so that's why we've split it into 2, so you can really listen carefully and hopefully learn a lot, take away a lot of value from this episode. So make sure to check out part 1 and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Just a question for you guys in terms of this. So, you hear a lot about use other people's money, etc. What would maybe your two's advice be with finding investors? Like, where would you find investors from and what would you say to them? How would you go about that?
It depends on, you can do it from your first property. Like what I just said, if you can build some credibility first, it's easy. You can go in any Facebook property group, say, look, here, I've done this, this and this. I've got this deal in front of me, ready to go. These are the returns I'm offering, message me with interest, and you'll get flipping 20 messages from active investors, like more than that. That's the easiest part. I guess if you're first starting, you've got no credibility, most people want you to have skin in the game. They won't want to use all of their money. If it is, then maybe you're going to have to give them a better deal to start with. But you got to be careful. You don't want to go and say, I'll give you 30%, mate, when you don't have that money and you're not going to draw that out of the property. So when you first get started, most people are going to want you to have some sort of skin in the game. So not necessarily, but I think maybe if it's, again, someone you actually know, family, friends, someone that's willing to do a joint venture, or you can clearly show you've got some knowledge or expertise or contacts or something to bring to the table, then I think you just need to try and get the first 1 or 2 done. Whether you just, you start on a real cheap 40 grand kind of place to at least get the ball rolling or something. And I think networking events, Facebook groups, all of that's where you can find the investment, friends, family.
And in terms of looking at the property market right now, excuse me, a lot of people are refraining to buy right now. The interest rates, as you know firsthand, have just like skyrocketed. So for somebody who wants to get involved in property, why now? And if not now, when?
I think touching it earlier with there is deals out there right now. Because there is 100% deals right now. You can get them cheaper than if you wait. I think the answer when is, in my opinion, you never really know. I just think just do it when you feel like, when you've got enough money to take that chance, because we have, like, imagine 5 years ago if you said the interest rates would be this much now, or we'd be in this situation, you wouldn't know. We don't know if it's going to go backwards or forward in 1 year, 2 year or 3 years. So I just think when you've got the money, I think just go for it. Yeah,
I think to add to that, I think property prices over the next 12, 24 months are definitely coming down. But like you said, there's already deals out there. So if they're predicting, let's say, a 10% drop or whatever in property, well, I just need to be putting offers in 12 months ahead of time of where I think it's going to be at, right? Or I need to calculate that into my numbers. And what I mean by that is, if I think, if a property is 100k now and I think that's going to come down to 90, then I need to make sure I'm offering 90 now. If I think that's where it's going to be in 12 months. And if I do that now and I do get it for 90 grand now, then what cash flow could I produce in those 12 months? I could still be in profit even if prices did drop slightly, because I've got my money back out. Now I'm getting positive cash flow every month. If I'm making 500 quid a month, 400 quid a month, 500, 600 quid a month, that's, let's say it's 500 a month. That's, again, if you get after the fees and stuff, but like 6k a year, you can start factoring that in. And then it's like, well, if you're ready, get started. But like I said, I don't think you need to, if you're starting from brand new point now, I think you need to do some good research. Don't rush into something. Spend 6 months in these group chats, networking with a few people, go to a few networking events, and like I say, try to not necessarily avoid people offering the mentorships, because I do think that's good, but just try and speak to people that are actually doing it and just get a feel for the whole industry as a whole before you make any rash decisions. Be scrolling through Rightmove, try and look up different areas and probably pick an area and focus on that area for your first few properties. But you don't want to go, yes, it's good to diversify, but you don't want to go Manchester, Newcastle, Cardiff, flipping Southampton, and I think you want to choose an area, become very knowledgeable on that area, take some trips up there, you know, come, you know, try and speak to people that live around there, see which areas, you know, yourselves, like one road to another can be a huge difference. Like within the same postcode, property prices can vary massively just because that's the rough end of the road and that's the nice end of the road. Do you know what I mean? So it's like there's a lot of things to factor in. And, you know, if you have got the money, then yeah, I'd say to do that and still start cheap and decide at the end you could flip it and move on to a next deal with all the knowledge you've gained, or you know, it might just not be a huge profit in property but you still learned a lot. If you haven't got the money, yeah, look for joint ventures, but you need to show that you've actually got some knowledge and expertise that you can bring to the table. Try and get some money to have some skin in the game. It will make your investor feel a lot more comfortable. If not, probably consider things like what Luke said, look down the sourcing route. Look down, I mean, what would you guys say on the whole rent-to-rent business or rent-to-rent service accommodation? Is that a good way to build up an initial bit of cash flow to get started, or?
I think it can be. I think it definitely can be, yeah, for sure. Just from experience in rent-to-rent as a whole, when we first got involved in rent-to-rent, and for the viewers listening, what rent-to-rent essentially is when you approach a landlord, you don't own the property, you then convince that landlord to rent that property to you. You get an agreement within the AST, which is a contract where they allow you legally to sublet the property. Not everyone does it legally. We always have done it legally. And then when you pay the rent to the landlord every single month, say you pay £1,500 a month for a 2-bed in Brighton, you know, you can either find a tenant and rent that property out for say £1,800–1,900, which is more of a probably hands-off strategy, make a few £100 per month per property without actually owning the property. Or what we've done in our case, depending on the area, if you look at Brighton as an area, it's very much a seasonal location, so everyone wants to go Brighton in the summer. So we've actually rented 6 properties in the Brighton area from a landlord. We gave him a slight, not renovation as such, we just put some nice furniture in there, got an interior designer to make it look nice, and we've put these properties on the holiday market. So by holiday market, you can put your property on Airbnb, Booking.com, Virgo. There's also a company called Mr. B&B, which is the gay version of Airbnb, designed by Airbnb. Obviously, Brighton, it, you know, makes sense. A couple of other, you know, booking platforms as well, and you can actually get nightly rates for your property. So say, for example, you've still got that same property, you pay £1,500 a month for that property. Well, in Brighton, you know, especially on, say, for example, an occasion like Gay Pride or the Marathon, people are literally paying like £300–400 a night some nights to stay in just a standard kind of 2-bed. So the risks are probably a little bit higher because you don't have that long-term contract, but the financial rewards are a lot higher. So I think in answer to your question, Joe, for somebody looking to get involved in property, doesn't want to buy yet, rent-to-rent can be a good strategy, but the best advice I could give anyone listening to this is make sure you're ready. Like, make sure you're ready for it, because it's not all swings and roundabouts. You know, we've definitely had our problems and challenges within this business, and if you're already building an empire in something else, say for example you've got a marketing agency like we do, you don't always necessarily have the time to build something to the best of its potential. We've done all right from the rent-to-rent thing. We definitely could have done better. Definitely could have done better if we had more time, but you know, it comes down to what's your baby? Our baby's HW Media, right? So yeah, I think rent-to-rent's a good option, but you know, make sure you're ready. It's not easy. Also, obviously, there's 3 of you. You've got a few. Do you think that works best because obviously you can all split the task, or do you think like one person, let's say 2 properties, and try and just perfect those and have less stress and maybe make, you know, £1,000 a month off of those 2 properties through the year? Do you think, what do you think's the... I think it's a good question, and I think if we actually look back on the data and the history, when we got our first 2 properties, summer 2020 I think, or maybe 2021, those 2 properties were very profitable in the summer, especially during COVID, because no one could actually go on holiday, so everyone was trying to go to the coastal areas, right? The benefits of having less properties is there's less tax implications. So you've got to bear in mind with rent-to-rent, the overheads are very, very high, right? The profit margins are quite low to a certain extent, so sometimes less is more. So in the summer of 2021, I'm pretty sure of 2 properties we were making a good maybe like what, 4,000 or 5,000 a month, some months, profit in summer from those 2 properties. But then, you know, the more you get, the minute you turn over more than, I think it's £80,000 or £85,000, you have to go VAT registered, which is value added tax, where you have to pay 20% of your turnover, not your profit, your turnover, to the tax man, essentially, right? So say, for example, you're turning over 100k, your profit margin's 20%, so your profit margin's £20,000. Then you've got to pay the VAT man 20%. You're in fact on zero. Then you've got your cleaning bills, then you've got your electricity, your council tax. Before you know it, you're actually minus. So yeah, I think there's different ways around it. Like certain landlords, they'll have properties in different people's names. So I might have, I don't, for the tax man listening, I don't, but you know, you could have like 2 properties in my name, 2 properties in Luke's name, 2 properties in your name. But then that's technically known as full segregation, and it's, you know, questionable as to whether you can do that.
I think if you were going to do it from the start, like now knowing what we know, you could just do it separately. Because now it's an issue because we've been running it together, so it's really long to split it all up. If you did it from the start and there was 3 of you, you could just do it separately in the first place.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're completely fine. It's just 3 separate businesses, and you can share your knowledge between you. I think it's a good thing to get into, but it's a lot time consuming. Now I think if we just kept on 2, then that would be fine, running 2, but running 6 is like...
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
If you're not trying to properly build a massive empire off the back of that. I think that's what I mean. I think it would be a good stepping stone potentially for like one person that hasn't got the money, but they could maybe do that for like, let's say 2 years, try and stack up 30k or something like that, and then they can say, okay, well now I want to actually move into owning properties and do the strategies we talked about.
You can do it slightly differently as well, where you don't put it on Airbnb, you just rent out separate rooms, so it's like HMOs instead, and that one can be quite good as well. But there's pros and cons to both really, but I think that it's a good... If you've got time in your hands, like you don't have, like, you're not trying to scale any other businesses. Like if I had a job and I wanted to make some extra money, then that would be, I would explore that.
Good option.
But I feel like what you got to be careful with is how to scale it in the correct way. I think that's one bit where we have found challenging for sure. I think probably went too big too quick, which then came with other challenges in terms of time, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think it's hard to understand the numbers in rent-to-rent as well, because you see a lot of money coming in, but you see loads of money going out, like a lot of money goes out. So I remember certain summers that our cleaning bill was £5,000, £6,000. I'm pretty sure a month, yeah. Cool. Not in the winter, but I mean, what I can tell you now is our cleaners made more than us from our property business than we have, like hands down. But I think it is a good business model. I know there are people that do well from it. But then if you look at the people that do well from it, it's that property guys. It's all they do.
Their main hustle.
Yeah, because I mean, if we invested even half the amount of time into the property thing as we've done with HW Media, you know, no doubt it could be a multi-6, 7-figure company right now, you know. So yeah, starting points I think is good. I think it's great for experience. You know, I've learned a hell of a lot. I still haven't learned how to set up an IKEA flat pack, but but yeah, you learn a lot about just business, VAT, you know, overheads, various different things. And boy, we've had some challenges with it as well with guests. You know, especially if you're running a holiday let. Yeah, a place like Brighton, you get parties, like a lot of parties. We've had prostitutes that have rented our space and turned our place into like a full-blown, literally brass house. What we didn't know about until the cleaners come 2 days later. There's wigs everywhere. There's, you know, fag burns in the sofa, and various other things that got found. But I won't go into too much detail. But there's a lot of stress that, you know, you've got to deal with. And then you also got your Karens, right? You know, you get certain guests that are just arseholes, like that will literally just complain about the smallest thing, like a little bit of speck on the radiator. They'll be like, this is unacceptable, I want a full refund, you know. But then you also get nice guests as well. It's I
think when people think about this business model, that's the first thing they think of, though, the parties and stuff like that. Or actually, I just like, it's actually quite a minority. When we look at, we've been doing it for like 2.5 years now. We've had literally hundreds of bookings, literally hundreds. And there's not that many that have that many problems. Like, you have them a few, but even those situations actually weren't that deep. Like, it felt deep at the time, but they were easily solvable. It was just stressful at that moment in time. But and now I think most of these problems that happened with the brasses that were our fault. Like, we could have avoided them. We didn't have the cameras turned on, which you would have seen them brassing up. We'll just see the people going.
Cameras outside the property, not
outside
in
the property,
not in the property.
Inside. Sam would run inside. But I'm saying there's things like
there's also
there's horror stories, but I don't think it's like there's definitely ways to avoid
like
a lot of
there's
things.
systems and processes you can put in place to avoid these issues. And again, it comes down to if this is your bread and butter, you've got time to implement those systems to stop that from happening. For example, ring doorbells outside the property that we do have that break down a lot. You can see who's coming in and out the properties. You can also get what's pretty cool. You can get it's called decibel monitors inside the property. So if the volume in a property goes over a certain amount, I don't know the exact decibel amount, but you get a notification through saying, these guests are being too loud. You can send them a warning. You can tell them if this happens again, you're gonna have to get kicked out of the property. Hiring a security team to be on call in case you do need to remove someone from the property. There are systems you can put in place. If you ain't going to put the systems in place, don't even start, because
it's all systems and processes. Yeah. I know you boys invested in some softwares and stuff, so maybe if we get feedback, if people want to hear a full podcast, because obviously I know there's a lot more you can go in detail about it, then let us know, and we could definitely do that.
We'll try to get the brasses on. I've still got a passport left yet, so we'll get her in as a guest.
There's also even the options of maybe the management side, which again we can touch on maybe in another podcast in more detail, but where you can just manage for other people, and it kind of cuts out that risk, and you're just taking a percentage. So there's obviously there is options there, but I think ultimately there's so many methods in property, so many. Obviously there's HMOs, which didn't really touch on today, but I think for me, after I've done the first couple, I want to actually do the same strategy as what I said, but into HMOs as well, because that's where you're going to maximise the property potential and the cash flow. I mean, that's where you can do very, very well on HMOs, and you can make, you can be talking £1,500 a month, £2,000 a month off of properties worth a couple £100,000 in positive cash flow. But the risk is obviously you need to make sure you're in an area where you're going to be able to fill the property at all the time. So if you've got 4 rooms, 5 rooms, you want them obviously filled the whole time. Do you know what I mean? Where some areas perform better than others, but also going into a recession and stuff, I see that will there's more opportunity there. I see I should have looked up the fact. I saw the other day on Rightmove, I think HMO searches, properties for HMOs has increased by, and I'm not going to pluck a number because I can't remember, but it was a lot. It was 80% or something in the last couple of months. Yeah. So obviously, because as people have less money, and if you want to move out but they can't afford to get a mortgage or whatever, cost of living, so HMOs are a great option for people, especially if they need to be in a specific area for work or something like that. Obviously, they might pay £700 or £600 a month for a room of a property. So it works out better for them rather than paying.
Bro, in a lot of cases,
$1,200, $1,500.
More. So before I was renting, I started off in HMOs, and to be honest, I hated it. But I don't think anyone really likes it as such, unless you're living with all your pals. But depending on, like you said, location, I was staying in a room I was paying nearly £900 a month for. It was a sick room, I had ensuite and that, but it's a room, right? Yeah. And then when you work out the numbers, in that property, there's 4 bedrooms, but the living room downstairs has been turned into a bedroom, the front room downstairs has been turned into a bedroom, now you've got 6 bedrooms. Say the average is £850 a month, right? And it literally is, if you're near London, these HMOs are nuts, right? If you work out the numbers, especially if you're on an interest-only mortgage, it can be very profitable. I think challenges with a HMO is finding a happy house. If you've got 6 people living together that don't know each other, what's the synergy going to be like? So I think if you are going to look to do HMOs, vetting your tenants is very important. Do they have similar interests? Are they working professionals? Are they... I don't know, DJs. If a DJ is living with an accountant, it's probably not going to work too well. So, HMOs, in my opinion, are definitely a great thing to look into. But, you've got to get the balance right in the house, for sure. That's
why I kind of didn't talk on it too much. I feel like you want to, first of all, just get experience on the first couple. Same strategy. Then, ultimately, when you're in and once you've got the momentum and you're in these networks and stuff, you're going to start seeing these other deals and other opportunities, which are out there to, you can make very good money off of off of property as a whole, really. But yeah, especially
Yeah.
off like HMOs and doing the strategy I kind of talked about earlier, still buying and refurbishing.
You know what's mad as well? I've read, I can't remember the exact percentage, but like the majority, like over 80% of self-made millionaires in the UK have made their money from property. Like when you actually think about that the majority of millionaires have made it from property. That makes you think, what else really do you want to delve into long term? Because numbers don't lie. No, you know?
Exactly. And I think banks that, like, not to go too deep into that side, but like banks are the ones that have the control ultimately. Do you know what I mean? Money is the ultimate power, and that is how that's how money's created largely. Is, one of the best ways is via houses. They give out mortgages, and that's how you're producing, debt, huge amounts of debt, which is kind of creating money and stuff, which is what they want. So yes, they're putting in things like the Section 24 and stuff for personal landlords and stuff, and they're always going to try and fuck certain people. But there's, ultimately people with power, like you just said, they're in property, they make huge money. The country runs off of flipping, whether it's from the banks, whatever, hugely off of property. There will always be a way to do it and to, profit hugely from it and not get absolutely fucked over. Do you know what I mean? So, because they're all doing it. So yes, it might get a bit trickier. You need to think a little bit smarter, think about how I said earlier to structure your company and stuff. But as long as you stay on the ball and you're always researching and you're thinking of new ideas and you're checking with accountants and solicitors and stuff like that, then yeah, there's always a way to make extreme wealth, I think, in property. There always will be.
Mate, definitely. And I think outside of buy-to-let, even just for residential, right? So, unless you're buying in like a third world country, I think ultimately if you hang on to a property long enough, you will accumulate some sort of wealth. Yeah. Like, for example, my mum bought a 3-bed terraced house in South Croydon in '94. She paid like 60 grand for it. She sold it in 2018 for 400 grand. Like, what else in the world, legal, can you make that type of money without doing anything? Like, it really is.
I do think, though, another point I just want to talk on which is my opinion, which I think sometimes people, I've had some good conversations with people on this, which I don't know if you boys know my opinion, but like, for instance, I'm not going to buy a house, and I don't want to buy a house myself until I see it as a liability, until I can afford to buy the house as a liability. Then I'm not going to buy my own personal house, I will rent. And when I say liability, yeah, it depends by your definition. Like for me, if I go out now and buy a 50 grand Rolex for myself, I know about watches, obviously I'm involved with watches, like I know that Rolex in the next 3-4 years is going to go up in value. So technically you say it's an asset, but I see, if I'm buying that for myself to wear because I want a nice watch, I see that as a liability. Same as some of these supercars or old classic cars. If I'm buying that for myself and I want to drive around, yes, it could go up and I could make money, but again, I see that as a liability. Same as if I was bought like a certain boat and that went up, And what I'm trying to say is, as you get rich, some of your liabilities, if that's how I'm going to class them, can actually go up in value, right? But if I'm just buying it for my own indulgence or whatever it was, then I see it as a bit of a liability. If it's not bringing cash into my pocket and there's no real end date of when I'm selling it. So like, a lot of people say, oh, they've got their house, their one house, they've got quite a lot of money in it. They're trying to pay off as much as they can and stuff like that. But ultimately, the main way to create wealth is leverage. So in order to have leverage, leverage is basically like what I said earlier, keep as little money in the property as possible and use the bank's money. Use the bank's money to own the property, and therefore you can repeat that process because the banks like lending money against property. You use the leverage of the bank to create multiple properties, which over time are going to go up in value more than the bank's interest. You're also going to, if you're doing the, that's kind of as a bonus, because if you're renting the property out for more than the mortgage, already you're having someone else pay the bank back and the interest back to the bank, and they're still paying you for doing so. Like, it's a win-win. So if you just have all your money in one house and you say, oh, but when I'm older, that's going to kind of be my pension and stuff. It's like, so you're going to get to however old, 60 or 65, and you just go from property to property. You might buy and sell a house a few times through your life, and now you've got quite a lot of money. You're still paying a big mortgage up until you're ready to sell and downsize. By then it's like, well, you say you've made a lot of money, but if you look at inflation over that period of time, how much have you actually made? And then a lot of people will say their answer might be, well, yeah, but you know, it's all relevant because I'm just then buying a next house and stuff, which is fine. That's true. Yeah. But then what about the answer you just said that I'm going to sell it and cash in when I get to retirement? So now you're not talking in property, you're now talking back in cash, which inflation has a impact on. So now we need to go back to how much has inflation gone up in the last 20 years and actually work out in relevance terms, how much have you actually earned? Plus you're paying interest off your mortgage anyway. It's not all just paying off your mortgage, you know. So between renting, yes, a mortgage is probably going to be cheaper compared to rent, but by how much? In our area, obviously up north where the yields are high and stuff, you know, maybe slightly different story, but where we are, where the yields are so small, on majority like now, like 4%, right? So if I went and bought a property now for £1,000, I might be able to rent it out for 1,200, 1,300. Like, okay, yes, each month I'm renting, I'm 300 quid kind of down, but if I take that money that I was going to put into my own property anyway and just let it sit there, right? If I take that money and I move it into an area where I can get a 10% yield, well, like it really don't take a genius to work out, oh, well, no shit. Like, obviously, you know, that money is far better off in 12% than 4%, whether I'm renting it out or not, because, you know, if you really wanted, you can then take that money that you're getting from up north or wherever. Let's say I put 200 grand into 300 grand worth of property in Nottingham instead of buying a 300 grand flat here is all I'd get. It means I could own multiple properties, so I'm diversifying. It means if times did ever get tough, I could sell one of the properties, or if I just wanted to cash in, I could sell one of the properties. You know, I don't need to sell all of them and make a rash big decision like that to sell my own home. And I could take that rent and it will cover my own rent down where I'm living here, and I would have profit on top. You see what I mean? So, like, if I had 10 properties up in Nottingham, if you gave me, I don't know how much, let's say I bought 10 properties for 100k, yeah, so that's £1 million, but I'm using the bank's money as well, remember? So I've only put 250 down and the rest is the bank's money. That compared to down here, again at £500 per property, let's say, that would be 5k a month. I could rent that same £1 million house down where I live for, let's say, £3,000, right? Now I've got £2,000 left over.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Still live in a banging house.
And I still live in that same house. And that £2,000 can go back reinvested to buy more properties. When I get to 20 properties, plus all the properties have gone up, you know, capital appreciation the same way and whatever else. But, you know, that now I've got 20 properties that could be paying me. Rents have gone up, you know, 10k, 12k a month, and I can refinance money back out. You know, it's a much quicker way to accumulate wealth. If you just focus on your one house, it also gives you freedom as well. Like, especially if you're like us, we're at high risk ultimately. So back to what you said about trying to get a mortgage, right? If you want a nice house, if you are technically earning good money, or your company's earning good money, but you're not paying yourself amazing money, well, you might be able to afford a £3,000 a month rent, but you're not going to get a mortgage for £1 million. And if you do want a mortgage for £1 million, you're going to have to pay yourself personally like a flipping
ridiculous amount,
insane salary, like 200k. You're going to have to pay 40% income tax on that, so that cost has to get factored in. So it's very different. You know, if you're a business owner, to get a luxury property or £1 million property, it's going to cost you so much money in tax to draw that out of your company for a few years to show them 3 years worth of books as self-employed. So you have to factor all of that in, and it just makes no sense at all.
What you're saying is very true, actually, because speaking to a mortgage advisor, for me to qualify, I think it was on like a 400k property, I'd need to pay myself, what was it? I worked it out, because they lend you like 4.5 times what you earn, 3.5 times what you earn, something like that. Best part of 100k, right? And then you're paying 40% tax, anything above 40k. When you actually work out the numbers, like the money it will cost, the national insurance, and then again, it's like the corporation tax as well from the extended dividends. When you work out how much that property's cost you just to get a 400k property, it's insanity.
And you've got to do that for like 3 years.
Like, yeah, for like 2-3 years as well. Whereas, you know, I think you were touching on this earlier, if you buy properties for a limited company, like me and Luke talk about this a lot recently, you know, if you've got, say, 50 grand profit left over at the end of the year, you're going to pay corporation tax on that, right? But you can buy a property instead, then you pay 0 corporation tax. So it does, like, it makes a lot of sense to look into property in every aspect.
You need your money working for you. You need it flowing. Like, there's no point in it just sitting in one property. Plus, also the thing is, if you have a smaller, you know, let's say you had a property that was like £1,000 a month or like £700 a month. Worst case scenario, if you lose your job, you can get a job at Tesco and you're going to cover your mortgage. But if you're a bit more ambitious and you want a larger house, you want a 1.5, £2 million house, where let's say the mortgage would have been 4k or the rent is, or 4 5k or the rent is 4 5k, that sort of thing. Worst case, if your business starts going bad or your job, you lose it or whatever, you might not be able to just replace that money straight away. You might now, if you own that house, you might be in a position where you think, fuck, like, I need to sell my house now. And, you know, but then in a year's time, you might be back on your feet. But then it's like, well, you know, it's like you have to make these decisions where if it's rent, I hand my notice in and I can downsize until I'm back on my feet, or, you know, I can just take precautions like that. Because if ultimately we live in, you know, the money we want to be earning is not replaceable like that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so you need to have the flexibility to be able to just move stress-free and not make rash decisions to just sell your house, you know. Or equally, like say if times were tough and you didn't want to hand your notice in, you sell one of your 10 properties or 20 properties up in the north, you know, and it will give you that extra cash flow to maybe see you through the next 6 months, 12 months. Or
question
whatever.
for both of you, just on that, you know, the viewers might be curious about this as well. You know, if anyone listening to this might be in a similar position to me, you've got a fair amount saved, you know, you're interested in buying your first property, you were thinking about buying residential, going down more so, say, the traditional route of residential ownership. Do you think it's worth them considering not buying residential and going buy to let and then renting? Like, what would be your thoughts on it, Luke, and also yours, Joe? Because I believe, Luke, you actually bought a buy to let before you bought your own residential, right?
Yeah, so that was kind of the game plan, really. Yeah, I think obviously I bought my house after I got that, and like, although that's a sick strategy what you got, but I was happy. Like, I wanted to live in my own house with my girlfriend as well, so it wasn't bothered about me, and I wanted to do it up as well. So I'm hoping I can get some money out of it. So I think it's different strategies for different people, right? But now it's like cool, straight back onto it. Want to get another buy to let and just build them up north.
I guess if you wanted to, Luke, you could even turn your residential into a buy-to-let if you really wanted to, and then you've got 2 buy-to-lets that could potentially pay your rent in a place where you're living for free and your mortgage is getting paid off too.
Or refinance that to take some cash into another property. So
yes, that's what I'm looking into. Yeah,
I think for me, so what I will say is, and I've said this to lots of people, I don't ever say, like, I'm not saying my what I just said, my strategy is right or wrong, right? And I'm not saying everyone should do that. I don't think everyone should do that. And I think if you don't want a big empire of properties, if you do just want, you know, maybe 3 buy-to-lets, and like I said earlier, you know, just build a few up for retirement or whatever, then, and you want to live in your own home, and like say you've got your girlfriend and whatever, like my girlfriend, for instance, she does not want to rent, she wants to buy a place, and it's like, you know, so it's like, I get it, I'm not even saying I'm right or wrong. The only thing that really winds me up, and I've had this with, I won't say who, but a few people anyway, is financially, yeah, if you want to, for financial reasons, what I just said about your residential home, based off the area we live in and surrounding, I'm 100% correct, and the facts and the data and the stats do not lie. Like, you're so miles off, yeah, which I hate when people come with no data, no statistics. They don't even know what the current inflation is. They don't know what interest rates are. They don't know what impact interest rates have. And I just think I've studied this stuff and property and investments and business for now I think I probably first started studying all the property when I was like 18. And I've got so much knowledge on it and still loads to learn, of course, but these numbers where I've wrote out for hours, workings out, speaking to people, this and that, it's like, financially, that is not the best option by any means, like not even close. No hugely successful. Look at the biggest property people. I don't know if, you know, I'm trying to think of the ones people know, like for instance,
Samuel Leeds.
Yeah, and like your Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki and stuff. They don't own their own house. They don't own their own house. Robert Kiyosaki now owns like 4, I think he said. But after getting to like 2,000 properties or something, just because he's bought them as, you know, like, you know, for enjoyment, as I will. I want to build my own house. I'm not saying I won't ever, but I need to get wealthy first. And it's not even close if you're trying to build wealth of, oh, owning my own property, oh yeah, I'll still make some money, compared to doing, like, you know, moving into areas. Like, how you've got to be pretty delusional to think that you're going to choose the house, because you're choosing a house with emotion. It's near this school that I want, it's on this road, it's in this area, it's nice because it's got this. And then when you come to do your house, you might think, oh, I want, you know, oh, let's just get a little bit more expensive kitchen or these expensive tiles or this carpet that's a bit nicer. Some of the things that might not add value to the property. Whereas it's all done with emotions. Whereas if I'm buying an investment property up in Nottingham or wherever, it's business and I'm doing it for what, you know, the numbers. I'm just trying to work out what's going to give me the best return on my investment. I want to choose in the road, the area, the property at the time. I'm not biased. I just want to look at the numbers and I want to do it from a business strategy. And the yields are so much significantly better up there compared to here. That just makes no sense. Not if, like I say, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Some people want their own home and stuff. Most people do, and I get it. They're not the same as like what I'm saying. But if it's for financial reasons, if you want to have the best financial gains in property, it's not even an option. Do your numbers, do your workings out, study, and you'll see it's not even close. That invest your money up north and use that money if you need to rent down here until you can build the wealth to actually afford to buy yourself. In
simple terms, right, if you got, let's say you've got 100k in a house, right, that you own, but if you put that 100k into something like properties up north and that was making you 10k a year, right, that 10k could be paying most of your rent. If you were renting, if you were doing it how you were doing, that could cover most of rent.
Then I guess it would feel like you're living for free to a certain extent if it's covering your rent and your mortgages are getting paid off, right?
Yeah, so then and obviously it's still scalable because you're using that money, whereas money in a deposit, technically my money in my house is kind of dead money. Where I'm going to make the money really is kind of saving a little bit because I've got the money going towards a mortgage, and then you've got the price of the property going up if you can do it that way.
So obviously, it, like, just as an example come to my head, like for when I was personal shopping, it's like you buying a Louis Vuitton keeper, like 3 Louis Vuitton keepers, let's say they're 1,500 each, and just sitting on them for a year. Yes, they're going to go up in value if they're the right ones, and yes, you can make them good, like, you know, if you decide to sell them. But not only are you saying, oh, I'm going to hold these keepers and then sell them, but you're saying, I have to also always own a keeper because you need your house to live in. So I always need a keeper, but yeah, trust me, they're going up in value. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to take that money for the next 12 months and keep the money flowing in and out, you know, cash flow. Mate, like, I will destroy you. I will absolutely destroy you in, you know, like it's not even, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your keepers go up by 30%, 40%, 50%. If I take that money and I keep it moving in an area that's much better, you know, it's like, it just makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. No, I agree. There's definitely some good pieces of advice there. I think if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about property strategies, reach out to Joe or even Luke, who, you know, is also involved in property. They're happy for a chat. I think maybe should we wrap it up from here?
Let us know. Give us feedback if any specific areas of property or anything we spoke about you want us to go in more detail on another episode.
And I think sometimes we do like talk jargon, so if, as in, some people don't know what we're saying sometimes, certain things, like, don't be afraid to just reach out and say, what does that mean? Because like, I've learned terms, I still learn terms. Even this conversation we had today, I've still learned things I didn't know before.
Definitely. Just for clarification, I didn't even know what VAT was until about a year ago. I had to go VAT registers. So if anyone wants to reach out about rent-to-rent, wants to learn a little bit from mine and Luke's experience, that we ain't going to charge you for it, we're not selling a course, just reach out. We're happy to give you some free value anytime.